BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Adam Binnie and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday, the 8th of April.
There'll be moments in time when it comes to tournament playoff finals, qualifying for tournaments where you go into that management mode, but at this point in time it's about the whole group learning how to play at the highest level, and with that comes risk, and that's where the learning happens.
Can Scotland upset the odds and beat Germany? Staying in Germany, could a forgotten Scotland forward earn a recall?
Fraser's cross ball, headed by Burke, off the post on the rebound! It's only Burke! He taps it into the net, and Scotland have their lead back!
Oliver Burke on the verge of a new deal as he impresses for Werder Bremen, and he's not the only one being topped up for a call-up.
Goal! Second goal for Dundee. Have a guess who?
And we mop up the talking points from the weekend.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
I'm delighted to say this morning we are joined by Craig Telfer and Joelle Murray. How are we doing this morning, guys?
I'm very good, thank you, Adam. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, all good, thank you, Adam.
Right, lots to discuss with Joelle and Craig. So let's start with Scotland to face an uphill battle in the Nations League after a 4-0 defeat by Germany at home on Friday. Joelle, start with you. Scotland, could be heading for 5 defeats in a row if they lose later on today. Not on a great run of form. How do you think the game went on Friday, and do you fancy the chances tonight?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, Adam. I think when you make that kind of promotion to League A, you know that every game is going to be a tough one, a very competitive one, and Germany sitting third ranked in the FIFA rankings. It was always going to be a tough ask on Friday, but as crazy as it may sound, I certainly don't think it was a 4-0 game. I think when you look at the goals in isolation, Sophie Howard on goal, one of them, another one, the assist was a ricochet from a tackle. So yeah, I think for me it definitely wasn't a 4-0 game. I think there was lots of positive elements in Scotland's play. I think you can see Mick McArdle speaks about wanting to be brave, wanting to adopt a new way of playing, and I think you could see flashes of that on Friday night, certainly.
Yeah, Mick McArdle said that the difference was just in both boxes, teams being more clinical. He was speaking about, Scotland had final third entries, but not quite box entries. What's going to be key tonight? What do we need to do differently to try and get a result?
Yeah, I think probably for me, suffering a lot out of pressure, out of possession, isn't comfortable, isn't really enjoyable. But when we do work hard to regain the ball, I think for me it's been better with it. It's regaining the ball and working in possession smartly, efficiently, and ensuring we've got players up the top end of the pitch that can hold up the ball, wait for that support, and then kind of open the pitch to our creative players, our players like Caroline Weir, Erin Cuthbert, and those alike. So I think that'll be important tonight, ensuring that those mistakes from Friday, those unfortunate circumstances and situations don't come into tonight's game. And again, the early goal on Friday night, I certainly don't think helped us. It almost kind of puts the game plan out the window to an extent. So staying in the game as long as possible, I think, will be the most important thing this evening.
Craig, Germany are third in the world, second in Europe, and they're in that position for a reason, a very good side. But the game on Friday, Scotland had a lot of the ball in both halves, even between each goals. They were seeing a lot of the ball, had a lot of possession. Did that surprise you, the amount of respect that Germany gave Scotland? Would you expect that to be the same tonight?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think we're probably going to see something similar from Germany. I think Joelle summed up very well. When you get that early goal on, it does change the game plan, and it allows Germany to settle into the game almost immediately there, that they've taken full control. And I think that by allowing Scotland players to have the ball, I think that's part of their game plan. It's like, if you've got the ball, we're in lead, what are you going to do to try and break us down? And I think that Germany will probably look to do something similar like that this evening, try and get an early goal, and then just try and execute that game plan as best they can.
Craig McMcardle's in interim charge just now, but surely the priority has to be looking forward to try and get a new permanent manager in the door and start building for the next campaign.
Yeah, I think so. The Nations League's always a difficult campaign because you're almost like a victim of your own success. We've seen that with the men's team, we're seeing it with the women's team, that when you're promoted to the top table, you are taking on some of the better sides in Europe, and some of the consequences of that is you're going to lose. I mean, we mentioned Germany, they're one of the best sides in the continent. The Netherlands also are an absolutely fabulous team as well. And so the defeats, while they're disappointing, they're not exactly to be unexpected at that level. But I think that since Pedro Martinez Losa's probably the latter part of his reign into his leaving the club, it feels we're a wee bit driftless, and we need a bit of direction. So hopefully a new manager can come in. I think it's only a matter of time before a new person comes in. So hopefully they can reinvigorate the team and take us probably back to the levels that we've shown in the past, around 2019, 2020, when we were qualifying for the World Cup.
Joelle, it's an interesting point that Craig made about Scotland perhaps being a victim of their own success in the Nations League. We've got this weird situation where Scotland almost sit between A and B. Scottish League B really struggle in League A. How does Scotland bridge that gap? How do they take it to the next level? And where do you think they really fit in the kind of hierarchy of the top teams in Europe at the moment?
Yeah, I think the only way you can do it is by continually playing these teams, these top tier teams. I think Erin Cuthbert hit the nail on the head. She spoke about you don't want to be. It's obviously nice winning games in League B comfortably without conceding, scoring lots of goals, but that's not where you want to be. Certainly as a nation, as a player, you want to be playing against the best teams, the best players in the world. And I think unfortunately for us at the moment, like you said, we probably fall within that middle ground, but the only way to be better, the only way to really push boundaries and step out of our comfort zone is by playing these teams. And if that means a result like Friday or two along the way to get where we want to be, then that's our journey. That's our realistic journey at the moment, Adam.
Yeah, and that's something that the interim head coach has spoke about quite a lot as well, this kind of learning period. He's also said that this is a transitional moment for Scotland. Are we all really seeing a changing of the guard? And do you think these kind of new players and younger players are learning?
Yeah, I think I would say so, yes. I think I like the way that Mick McArdle's come in with a freshness, he's addressed the balance, experience and youthfulness balance. But I think, like Craig said, at the moment, unless Mick McArdle's going to be the SFA's number one choice, that is only a short-term vision. Unless it's a vision that the SFA are dictating to Mick. But knowing Mick myself, certainly that would be his vision. So for me, it's short term unless the SFA appoint Mick McArdle as a long-term successor to Pedro Martinez Losa.
Yeah, well, we'll move on for now, but remember everyone, you can watch that game live on the BBC Scotland channel tonight from 4:30. That's Scotland women back in action against Germany. That one's in Wolfsburg tonight, 4:30 on the BBC Scotland channel. For now, let's turn our attention to a couple of Scots plying their trade abroad who've been hitting the continental gossip columns this week. Craig, first up, Oliver Burke. This seems to be a man who's in, out all the time, really since he's been a teenager. Finally seems to have settled at Werder Bremen and looks set up for a new deal. What have you made of his time there and his career as a whole?
I think Oliver Burke is probably better in theory than he is in practice. And what I mean by
that's a great way to put it.
I don't like being critical of the guy, but I think that if you were a manager, you would take a look at him, like his pace, his build, like the raw attributes, and you'd be like, my goodness, we have got something absolutely superb to work with. We could really carve a top tier striker out of this guy's God-given talents. However, I just never think he's really been able to bring it together ever since he was a teenager breaking through to I think he's 27, 28. And I think that because of that, I think he's just the promise of Oliver Burke will always be there, but just because he's never been able to bring it together, I think that's perhaps why we're seeing him dipping in, dipping out of the team. I think he's having a decent enough season at Werder Bremen. He scored 4 goals, scored against Frankfurt at the weekend there, so putting him back into people's consciousness. And I'm obviously delighted for him that he's doing well over there and he's still able to play at a top level. But I just think he is much more intriguing an idea than he is to actually, if you were to see him out in the pitch at Hampden for Scotland running in straight lines.
It's straight lines, God. He's only 27, as you mentioned. 5 years since his last call-up. Craig, could you see a potential route back into the national team?
Maybe if terrible accidents befell all our other strikers, and he was there by default. But I think that something. I'm being a bit facetious here. I'm being a bit cruel. But I at the moment, no, I don't think so. I think that we know who our pool of strikers are. And I know there's perhaps a degree of frustration that we haven't necessarily been ruthless or prolific in front of goal recently. But I think we probably need to see a sort of larger body of positive evidence from Burke, maybe going into next season, for him to be considered a recall to the national team.
Yeah, Joelle, as Craig mentioned, he's been playing as a striker, but earlier in his career, Ollie Burke was used as a winger, has played occasionally there for Werder Bremen as well. That's something Scotland really seem to lack, is wide players and pace. Do you think that could perhaps be a different option for Scotland if they look to try and bring guys into the squad, especially if they're going to play this back four formation as opposed to the wing backs? Is that a different option that we could perhaps look at?
Yeah, potentially. I certainly don't think we're a nation that can overlook players that are in form for their club. And I think, for me, Craig's hit the nail on the head again there. I think he's been a player who, for me, has never really reached his full potential. When you look at his attributes visually, he looks like a player that should be able to kind of stand out and kind of really dictate performances, but is not really, from what I can remember, had a kind of serious period of consistency in his career wherever he's went, and that's probably been his downfall and probably why he hasn't added to the caps that he certainly has at the moment for his country.
If there was a camp this weekend, Craig, Joelle, yes or no, are you taking Ollie Burke?
Why not? Why not? Because I think that there's other strikers that perhaps people are clamouring for to get into the Scotland team. I think probably Oliver Burke's closer to them than others. I think we've obviously got the friendlies coming up at the end of the season against Iceland and against Liechtenstein. If he continues his form, if he continues to contribute to Werder Bremen and kicks them on, then I think he's perhaps somebody worth exploring for the next camp. Yeah.
Yep, I would agree. I think, like I said, we certainly can't overlook players, and a player that is in current form, if it was a camp that was a friendly or anything like that, I think those are the opportunities that we need to really look at these players in that environment. So, yeah, why not?
Another Scotland star in the news is Lewis Ferguson. Some speculation mounting of a move for him to join Scott McTominay and Billy Gilman at Napoli. So could have a Scottish midfield three at one side in Serie A. They actually Bologna played against Napoli last night. Craig, do you think that would be a good move if Ferguson was to join his two mates at Napoli?
Of course it would. Of course it would be excellent. You want to see the Scottish players playing at the very highest level possible. And Napoli are, certainly over the last couple of seasons, been regularly appearing in the Champions League, playing against some of the best teams in Europe. So for Ferguson to join them and effectively form what could be the future Scotland midfield going forward, all playing at once, that's very exciting. That's very exciting. Napoli, Serie A is just maybe it's just because I'm of the age when I still remember the 90s into early 2000s when Serie A was the most exciting division in the world, and I think there still holds a degree of fascination for me. So seeing potentially three Scottish players all playing together at Napoli, that just seems really, really cool. So I hope Ferguson can move upwards if he does leave Bologna. But if it is to Napoli, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, Joelle, Craig mentioned there a potential, future Scotland midfield three. All three players are in the national team just now, but Lewis Ferguson just doesn't seem to be starting as often. Steve Clarke tends to use him off the bench. Should we be seeing Lewis Ferguson in Scotland's starting 11s going forward? Should he be getting more starts for his country now?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's probably in a position where he's a little bit unfortunate. It's a very, very strong area of the pitch for us. I think for me, I would like to see him start more, feature more, because the Italian league, like Craig said, is an exciting league, but it's a league that for me you only see glimpses of unless you're really, really searching for it. So I would like to see him in that midfield for Scotland. And if he achieved that Napoli move, sounds like his agent's doing a little bit of talking, adding a bit of fuel to the fire at the moment. So yeah, if he can get that Napoli move, playing that midfield three for his club, and bring some domestic form to the international stage, then yeah, it would be extremely exciting.
Finally, let's deal with the hangover from what was another dramatic weekend, even by the wild standards of Scottish football. The campaign for a Scotland call-up for Simon Murray intensifies after another double for him on Saturday. I've asked you about a number of players now, but Craig, Simon Murray in this, we've made up this situation where there's a camp this weekend. Is Simon Murray in your squad at 33 years old?
No, let's not get carried away here. I love Simon Murray, and I think he's fabulous to watch, and the way that he operates for Dundee, so vital in them and their chances for survival. A lot of it is going to pin on his going to be resting on his shoulders. However, like we were talking about with Oliver Burke, when anyone does well, there's always like a clamour to get them into the Scotland team, and unfortunately it doesn't really work like that if you are performing well at club level, you're rewarded by an international call-up. It just doesn't work like that, and I think that's what frustrates a lot of people. I think the fact he's playing for Dundee hinders him, that there's not as much pressure playing for a team like Dundee as there would be a team like playing for Hearts or Hibs or Aberdeen, Celtic, Rangers. And because of that, and because of his age, and because of the style of play, I think we need perhaps something a bit more cerebral up front. And I know that people might be frustrated with the likes of Shea Adams' form or Lyndon Dykes' form or what they may have seen from George Hurst so far, but I do think they are much further ahead of him in the pecking order. And I love Simon Murray. I don't want to punch down on him, but I just think that his time to be involved in Scotland is well, I don't think it ever really happened, let alone passed.
Joelle, would you agree?
I don't know. I don't know if I would have him in. I would maybe have him. Sorry, in our made up camp.
Go on, put him in.
I don't know if I'm a little bit biased because he's an ex-Hibs player, but yeah, I think Simon's had a tremendous season in what's been a really, really poor Dundee team. He's the top scoring Scotsman in the country. I think 6 ahead of Kevin Nisbet, who was in the last Scotland squad. But Craig's right. It's a different dynamic. It's a different environment. Just because you're playing well, scoring goals for your club, doesn't necessarily mean that you step into the national team and that form continues, because there's so many different kind of dynamics in that international kind of environment. But for me, what a season is having. Clinical, his work rate is absolutely tremendous. So yeah, take nothing away from Simon Murray's season. I think he's been absolutely incredible. But as we just said there, whether he would be able to continue that form and those goals in the national team, I don't know.
Yeah, certainly having a good season is Simon Murray, continuing on his form from last season at Ross County. Now, I mentioned some wild rumours that we're going to get on to. Now, this one, potentially the most ridiculous of the season. We're not even in the transfer window yet, and there's been rumours linking Celtic's Greg Taylor with a move to Rangers, with him set to leave Celtic Park in the summer. Craig, is this just the start of this silly silly season of transfer business, or do you think there's anything in this? Can you see a world in which Greg Taylor signs for Rangers?
I could see it, but I think it's very unlikely to happen, just purely because of the rivalry between Rangers and Celtic. It's not often that you see players directly going from one club to the other. In fact, off the top of my head, I can't think of any, certainly outside of youth level, players moving between that level. I can't think of it. However, if it was to happen, certainly on paper, I think it'd be a terrific signing for Rangers. I think that Taylor's shown he's got the minerals, he's got the character to play for a big team. He's resilient. I think there's a number of times he's been written off, but always seems to bounce back and always seems to do well for them. Tactically astute. I thought he was particularly excellent under Ange Postecoglou. He really seemed to bring out the best of him. And I think he's perhaps a bit unfortunate that it's Kieran Tierney is returning to Celtic, which means that he will no longer be the first choice. In fact, he's lost his position to Jeffrey Schlupp there. So, yeah, I think on paper it would be a good signing, but just because of the rivalry between the teams, it feels to me that it's something that's a wee bit unlikely.
Yeah, Joelle, there's no doubt that Greg Taylor would be good enough to play for Rangers, but would Rangers fans and would Celtic fans accept that?
Probably not, no. I think, like you said, he would certainly enhance their team. He's found himself in an unfortunate position, I think, but when you consider the other potential and reported options, Dinamo Zagreb had a failed effort in January, and there's seemingly some MLS clubs kind of circling about. So when you consider those other options, I think certainly from my perspective, Greg Taylor will look at them ahead of a cross across the city of Glasgow.
Yeah, but Rangers went down 2-0 to Hibs at the weekend, of course, and Joelle, we can't have you here without mentioning Hibs 16 games unbeaten in the league now. All of a sudden, Rocky Bashiri's a decent centre-half. What's happened?
Rocky's always been a decent centre-half, just misleading everyone at the beginning of the season. But no, I think Rocky knows his strengths, knows his capabilities, knows what he can and can't do. And I think as the seasons went on, he's kind of grown into that kind of central centre-back role. And I think absolutely delighted for Dave and Sammy and the boys there, because the patience and the faith that the club has shown them has certainly paid off. And Craig and I were speaking before we came on air about it not being a fluke, it not being a smash and grab. It was a very competitive game at Ibrox, and certainly I think we were worthy of that win.
Just finally for you both, the race for the top six goes down to the final weekend after Hearts lost to Dundee United. One word answer from you both. There are three teams still looking for that sixth spot. We've got Hearts still in there, St Mirren still in there, Motherwell. Who's getting it? Craig first, then Joelle.
Heart Midlothian.
St Mirren for me.
St Mirren, oh, interesting, okay. I like that answer, no problem at all. Right, well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Craig, Joelle, thank you so much for coming on. That was Craig Telfer and Joelle Murray, of course. Thank you, everyone, for listening as well today. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every single day, so make sure you don't miss out on any of them. You can subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Thanks everyone for listening to myself, Craig and Joelle this morning. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
On BBC Sounds, from life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
He caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.